finest building in the city, maybe the country, in the world. Judy, in the world, it's going to be the finest building in the world. It's going to be a spectacular hotel, absolutely spectacular, first class, and
That sounds very ambitious. Where do you get the drive? Still so young, Donald.
I got flair and I'm smart, so I think that's going to make me successful. But I also want to stay humble.
Sorry, Judy. Listen, let's do the rest in person and bring a photographer, okay?
Sorry, all right.
No, I mean, listen,
Caught
it's
me
your
off
life. You got a ways to go, but you're learning.
But what did you find interesting about it? Considering 2016, a lot was being talked about with Trump. So what about this specifically did you think made for a good movie?
Well, I personally was trying to get my head around what had just happened from a cultural place, not from a political place. I didn't have any, wasn't sort of pondering like Republican versus Democrat. I was really trying to understand for myself what was it about that campaign and that candidate that represented something really meaningful to our culture, to our country. I felt like this was a story that nobody had really looked at. You know, we know who Trump is pretty much from his 40s onward, when he was a well-known real estate mogul and a television personality and, and then a candidate. But what we hadn't really ever had access to was who he was as a young man and what his influences were. And I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. And for me, it was about really understanding the underpinnings of how he became who we know him to be, but also, as Gabe and I developed it, understanding the long shadow that Roy Cohn still casts on our culture, I think was super fascinating, because I think there's a whole generation that doesn't even know who Roy Cohn is, but he is everywhere in our culture today.
And Sebastian, you met with the director on Zoom in 2019, correct?
Yeah.
And so what about playing Donald Trump in this particular era did you find interesting and make you want to take this on?
I was surprised because I felt drawn to it in the sense of how I've had my own journey with this American dream, coming from Romania and growing up in America, my teenage years, and sort of like how I was informed about this dream and the land of opportunity, and you have to make something of yourself. And then it was interesting to sort of try and figure out who this person was. I think there was some value in trying to understand how things happened and how he became what he is today.
And Jeremy, Roy Cohn is featured so much in American theater and film. What do you think it is about him that is so captivating to screenwriters, directors? What about him do you think is so cinematic in a way?
Well, I mean, he really is like sui generis. There's no one like Roy Cohn, this sort of commingling of brutality and tenderness, and he has a kind of gleefulness, and yet he also was a really, absolutely reprehensible person. But I do think he's a colorful, vivid, archetypal character. He's like Iago or something. So I think there's a reason why dramatists have been drawn to him and actors have been drawn to him, and it's a sort of the kind of highest degree of difficulty kind of character. Every great movie is about a relationship, and I saw this as a love story. We talked about Midnight Cowboy a lot. Not a erotic or romantic love story, but a platonic one. And Roy considered Donald his best friend. They spoke on the phone a dozen times a day for most of their lives together until Donald kind of discarded him. And I feel like our job is to kind of check our judgments at the door and find an empathic way to try and embody any character and try and understand their anguish and their struggle. No one is too odious to do that for. I think I think you should maybe not play a character if you feel that way about them, because that would, I think, eclipse your ability to dimensionally understand them. There's something I thought about a lot something I read that Jung said that where love is absent, power fills the vacuum. And I find that this movie's about that in so many ways.
And Sebastian, this is such a interesting version of Trump. You're watching it, and in the beginning, you're like, I see it, and then by the end, you're like, oh, that is the Trump that we see, on our screens. Can you talk about your way in, how you sort of picked certain mannerisms to adapt early on in the screenplay, and then how you expanded upon it by the end?
Ali and I had talked extensively about sort of this this little volume knob that we never really addressed, but we would look at each other where it's like, where do you turn that a little more or a little less, but it did require a bit of that kind of technical awareness, because again, you're fighting projections that you're coming into with this. You've seen a million things of him, and it's already about trying to kind of get you to reintroduce him to an audience. And there was always going to be things about him that even back then are recognizable if you look back. But everything here felt like it had to be earned, because in 1 second too much and then you're out of it. That's the value to me of the film that we're not getting in the news clips and in the algorithms and in the SNLs. You're not getting that. You got to see what he's hiding from everybody.
Amy, as a producer, what did you learn about producing, making something that has been this talked about and has had such a long road to getting made?
This is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Right.
It's also the thing I'm the most proud of. And I'm not saying this because they're both sitting here. I couldn't have dreamed of two better humans and actors to be a part of this. I mean it sincerely. They have been extraordinary partners, not just people who show up and play a role. They have been absolute partners. A lot has been asked about the timing of it and why make this movie, and I'm very clear on why I wanted to make the movie, because I thought there was a really important relationship to explore. And I don't think the movie is a hit piece. Almost everyone who sees it says it isn't a hit piece. A lot of people are uncomfortable with the empathy they feel for these two people as you talked about it. I think that at the end of the day, it's really important as a filmmaker, whether you're an actor or a producer or director or screenwriter, to stick to your guns. And I think that's what I learned the most about this, was so many people at so many turns kept saying, why would you make this? And I think that the script spoke for itself. I think Ali as a filmmaker speaks for himself. I think certainly these extraordinary performances speak for themselves. And it's a piece of art. We're telling a story. It's not a docudrama. It's not a documentary, but it's worth putting art like this into the world. And that's what I learned about it.
I know we're out of time, but, I did feel like Amy was really courageous in shepherding this against such strong headwinds over so much time. And Ali has been really courageous, and he's been courageous before in his other work, but he continues to kind of speak truth to power and not be afraid. And I feel so honored to be sitting up here with Sebastian, who I saw every day doing completely fearless work. I mean, he had to wear the cape in this movie, and as actors, the chance to do work that requires transformation and risk, that's sort of all we can ever ask for. So yeah, I feel proud to have been part of this.
So all three of you not scared to do this hard stuff, right?
Scared, but that doesn't stop you.
Exactly.
Right. I think that's the answer. I mean, if we don't persevere, what are we doing? That's kind of how I felt about it, is that, as a filmmaker and a producer, you don't get a chance to make movies like this all the time. And that was worth fighting for.
Okay, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.